This is the country that was supposed to buy California. In 1989, Japan's Imperial Palace, that single plot of land in central Tokyo, was valued at more than the entire state of California. 8 of the world's 10 largest banks were Japanese. Not American, not European, Japanese. Tokyo's Ginza district had the most expensive real estate on the planet, and economists in Washington weren't asking if Japan would surpass the United States, they were asking when. So, what happened? Right now, in Japan, there are 10 million empty houses, not abandoned after a war, not destroyed by earthquake, just left, doors unlocked, calendars frozen on years nobody mentions anymore. Walk through certain neighborhoods in rural Japan today, and you'll hear almost nothing. No kids, no traffic. 1 in 3 people in Japan is now over 65. 1 in 3. That number just crossed 30% this year. And the number of babies born in 2023? 758,000. In a country of 125 million people. That's the lowest ever recorded. It's been falling every single year since the 1970s, and it's accelerating. The answer isn't just economic. It's not a story about interest rates and stock markets. It's a story about a culture that built a machine so perfectly optimized for one era that it became completely incapable of surviving the next. And it all starts with a mistake that wouldn't fully detonate for another decade. But when it did, it didn't just crash an economy, it deleted an entire generation of human beings. How does a country the world feared most become a nation that's quietly vanishing? Tokyo, 1986. You're in the Ginza district on a Friday night, and the city feels like it's vibrating. Neon everywhere, every bar overflowing. Businessmen in perfectly pressed suits ordering bottles of whiskey they don't even finish because the next bottle is already on its way. This isn't excess for the sake of it, this is celebration. Japan had, by almost every measure, pulled off the most remarkable economic comeback in modern history. Think about what the country looked like 40 years earlier. Firebombed, occupied, 2 atomic explosions, a GDP roughly equivalent to a mid-sized American city. And then through a combination of American economic engineering, a deeply disciplined culture, and a system of corporate alliances called the keiretsu, Japan grew its economy by 435% between 1955 and the mid-1970s. They called it the Japanese miracle. That wasn't marketing, that was just accurate. The keiretsu system was at the heart of it. Picture a club, not a cartel, more like a family, where Toyota, Mitsubishi, Sony, and their associated banks all own shares in each other, cover each other's losses, and lobby the government together. Competition is fine outside Japan. Inside Japan, the family protects itself. Add the government's policy of blocking foreign companies from entering the Japanese market, and you've built an almost impenetrable economic fortress. By the 80s, made in Japan had flipped completely. It used to mean cheap novelty toys from a devastated country. By 1985, it meant Sony Walkman, Toyota Camrys, and Nikon cameras, premium, reliable, coveted. Japan was running the largest trade surplus on the planet. Year after year, the money just kept coming in. And here's where it gets surreal. At the absolute peak, Japanese companies weren't content with manufacturing excellence. They wanted everything. Mitsubishi Group purchased Rockefeller Center in New York City. Sony bought Columbia Pictures. And not just real estate and movies, Japan was buying 75% of all US government bonds for sale in the late 1980s. 75%. Japan was essentially financing American debt. Back home, it got even stranger. Golf club memberships. Not owning a golf course, just membership to play at one, were being traded at $3.5 million. There was an actual functioning secondary market for these memberships. The total value of that golf club membership market hit $200 billion. To put that into perspective, that single market, golf memberships in Japan, was worth more than the entire GDP of Taiwan. And Nissan, a car company, was making more money through speculative financial investments than actually building and selling cars. A car company, not investing in cars, investing in land and stocks, because land and stocks were printing money faster than any factory ever could. Between 1985 and 1989, Japanese stock prices rose 240%. Land prices rose 245%. That's not growth. That's levitation. Nobody wanted to be the person who said, "This can't continue," because every time someone had said that in the previous 20 years, they'd been wrong. Here's the thing about a party that lasts long enough. Nobody notices when the exits get locked. The money was real. The confidence was real. The feeling that Japan had cracked some permanent code of prosperity, that was the lie. And the people who locked the exits, they were trying to solve a different problem entirely. This is where it starts to go wrong. September 22nd, 1985, Plaza Hotel, New York City. Finance ministers and central bank governors from 5 countries, the US, UK, France, West Germany, and Japan, sit down to solve America's problem. America's trade deficit had exploded. American manufacturers were being destroyed by cheap Japanese imports. Congress was furious. The word retaliation was being used openly in Washington. The agreement they reached was called the Plaza Accord. The core mechanism was simple: force the Japanese yen to rise in value against the US dollar. A stronger yen means Japanese exports get more expensive for American. More expensive exports means fewer Japanese goods flooding the US market. American manufacturers breed again. Problem solved. Except the yen didn't just rise, it surged. It went up far faster and far further than anyone in that room had projected. In roughly 2 years, the yen appreciated by nearly 50% against the dollar. Japanese exports, the entire engine of the miracle, suddenly became brutally expensive overnight. Japan's economy was staring down a serious slowdown. And in that moment of panic, the Bank of Japan made the decision that would define the next 30 years. They cut interest rates aggressively, all the way down to 2.5%, the lowest interest rate in the world at the time. The logic was, make money cheap, stimulate borrowing, keep the economic engine running, protect the manufacturers, protect employment, protect the miracle. But here's what they missed, or maybe chose not to see. When you make money that cheap, rational people stop using it to build things. They use it to buy things, specifically things that are already going up in value. The Bank of Japan had a policy called window guidance, a quietly authoritative system where the central bank would essentially tell commercial banks how much to lend and to whom. It wasn't optional. If the Bank of Japan said lend more, you lent more. No questions about whether the borrower could pay it back. No serious scrutiny on what the money was for. The quota was the quota. From 1986 to 1989, this system was running at full blast in the wrong direction. Banks were being instructed to increase lending regardless of loan quality, and the money flowed, not into factories, not into R&D, not into infrastructure. It flowed into land, into stocks, into the already inflating bubble. The feedback loop was perfect and perfectly destructive. Banks lend cheap money, people buy land prices rise, the land becomes collateral for more loans, banks lend more money, repeat. By the end of the 1980s, the cost of land in Japan's private sector had reached 2,000 trillion yen. In 1969, that same number was 14.2 trillion. That's not appreciation, that's a different planet. Everyone in charge could see the numbers. Nobody wanted to stop the party. When a reporter asked one Bank of Japan official whether he planned to rein in the bank's excessive lending, the official said that the banks were just following orders from the Bank of Japan. That's it. That's the whole tragedy in one sentence. Nobody owned it, nobody stopped it, and the bill was coming. In 1989, authorities finally blinked. They capped real estate loans, then raised interest rates from 2.5% to 4.25%, then to 6%. On January 1st, 1990, the market opened and the selling began. By December of 1990, more than $2 trillion in stock market value had simply evaporated, not transferred to someone else, gone. Land prices collapsed. Banks that had lent recklessly were now sitting on mountains of loans that would never be repaid. 212,000 businesses went bankrupt in the years that followed. 5 million people lost their jobs. That's the economic story, and as brutal as it is, economies recover, but Japan didn't come back. And the reason it didn't, the real reason, has nothing to do with interest rates or stock tickers. It has to do with a ritual, a very specific, very Japanese ritual that was about to destroy the futures of millions of people who had done nothing wrong except be born at the wrong time.
To understand what the bubble burst actually did to Japan's people, you need to understand how getting a job in Japan works, or rather, worked. There's a ritual called Shushoku Katsudo, job hunting season. Every year, final year university students across Japan simultaneously put on identical black and white suits, attend the same group interviews, submit the same applications, and compete for positions at Japan's largest companies. All of this happens on a synchronized schedule. Companies hire once a year, in bulk, fresh graduates only. If you get in, congratulations, you likely have a job for life. The concept of shushinko-yo, or lifetime employment, meant that once a major Japanese corporation hired you, they would keep you, promote you internally, groom you for decades. Your company became your second family, your identity. And if you don't get in, if you miss that single annual window, most major companies won't look at you again. You're not a fresh graduate anymore. You're already outside the system. The doors don't reopen. During the boom years, this wasn't a cruel system. The economy was growing. Companies needed workers. Nearly every graduate who wanted a corporate job could find one. The ritual was intense, but it worked. Then 1991 hit. Companies, bleeding money, holding worthless assets, watching their stock prices crater, did the only thing they could think of to protect their existing lifetime employees. They stopped hiring new ones. Almost entirely, for nearly a decade. Think about what that means. An entire decade's worth of graduates, people who did everything right, who studied hard, who put on the black and white suit and showed up, graduated into a country where the hiring window had simply been closed. No positions, no exceptions, come back never. This period became known as the Employment Ice Age, and the people who came of age during it, roughly those who graduated from the early 1990s through the early 2000s, became known as the lost generation. Not metaphorically lost, structurally, systemically, permanently lost. Because when companies finally resumed normal hiring in the 2000s, they hired fresh graduates. Again, that was the rule. That was the system. The people who graduated in 1994, or 1997, or 1999 were now in their late 20s and early 30s. No longer fresh, no longer eligible, no longer visible to the machine. They fell through the cracks, and the cracks closed behind them. These weren't lazy people. They weren't failures. They were, by every objective measure, the victims of timing. The bubble burst happened to them. They didn't cause it. They didn't choose it. They were simply the ones standing at the door when it slammed shut. What they were left with: part-time work, temporary contracts, low wages, no benefits, no career trajectory, no pension. And in a society that still, quietly, judges your worth by your employment status and the logo on your business card, no real social standing either. Around 17 million people, close to 15% of Japan's entire population, are considered part of the lost generation. They're now in their 30s and 40s. They should be, statistically, the most economically active people in the country. The ones buying houses, raising kids, taking out mortgages, funding pension systems. They're the engine. Except they never got to be the engine. And now there's a hole in Japan's economy and its society shaped exactly like them. Here's the number Japan's government doesn't want to talk about in public. 758,000. That's the number of babies born in Japan in 2023, a record low. Down 5.1% from the year before, declining every year. You might look at that and think, demographics, aging society, happens everywhere. But it doesn't happen this fast, and it doesn't happen like this, because the lost generation, the 17 million people who never got stable jobs, never got economically secure enough to marry, never felt like they had a foundation to build a family on.
They also, overwhelmingly, never had children. The babies that weren't born in the 1990s and 2000s aren't here to have babies in the 2020s. The bubble didn't just crash an economy in 1990, it reached forward in time, all the way to now, and hollowed out the future. And for some of these people, the story got even darker still.
Picture a house in a suburb outside Osaka. The house is quiet. The lights are mostly off. Downstairs, an 80-year-old father, retired, surviving on pension money, prepares 2 meals. One for himself. One day he leaves outside a closed bedroom door at the end of the hall. Behind that door is his son, 53 years old. He hasn't left the house in 11 years. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have a phone. He has a room and a door and a father who is running out of time. This is the 80-50 problem, and it's not a metaphor. Japan's Cabinet Office estimates there are over 600,000 households where an elderly parent, typically in their 70s or 80s, is the sole financial support for a middle-aged child who has withdrawn completely from society. In some surveys, the numbers are higher. The children in these households are called Hikikomori. The word translates roughly to social withdrawal, but that clinical phrasing doesn't do justice to the reality. These are people, overwhelmingly men, who have retreated entirely, not just from work, from human contact, from sunlight sometimes, from the world. The first wave of Hikikomori were almost exactly members of the original lost generation. Men who graduated in the 1990s, couldn't get stable jobs, felt the crushing shame of failing to fulfill the expectations of a culture that defined manhood through career achievement, and eventually, after years of trying and failing and trying again, simply stopped, checked out, closed the door. And here's the unbearable part. Their parents, raised in the miracle era, raised to believe that Japan always rewards hard work and loyalty, often didn't know how to respond. So they just kept supporting them, kept leaving food outside the door, because what else do you do? There are nearly 1 million Hikikomori in Japan today, maybe more. The number is almost certainly undercounted because shame keeps these families hidden, and new ones are still joining. Not just from the original lost generation anymore. Younger men too, who looked at the ruthless job market, the endless hours, the strict hierarchy, the single annual shot at getting in, and decided the cost was too high. The economic hit from this is huge. Japan already has the highest proportion of elderly people of any nation on Earth. By 2050, the ratio of working-age adults to retirees is projected to hit 1.3 to 1. Meaning, for every person over 65, there will just be 1.3 people of working age to support them through taxes, pension contributions, and healthcare spending. In most countries, that's a crisis. In Japan, it's happening while millions of working-age people are not working, while the generation that should be the foundation is, instead, behind closed doors. And the houses, the 10 million empty ones we started with, Japan has a word for them: akiya. Ghost homes. When aging parents die and their hikikomori children can't maintain the property, or when elderly people simply outlive their entire community, the houses get left. Not sold, there's no one to buy them in shrinking rural towns, just left. The government has started giving some of them away for free, sometimes paying people to take them, and still can't find enough takers. Japan is now in the process of disappearing from the inside out. The rural towns go first, then the suburbs. Tokyo remains, for now, a gravity well pulling in the remaining young population. But even Tokyo's birth rate is below replacement.
So here's the full picture. In 1985, 5 countries signed an agreement in a New York hotel to solve an American trade problem. That agreement panicked Japan's policymakers into flooding the economy with cheap money. That cheap money inflated a bubble so enormous that when it burst, it didn't just wipe out balance sheets, it shattered the hiring machine that an entire generation depended on. That generation never got stable jobs, never started families. Some of them closed their bedroom doors and never came back out. And the children they didn't have are the missing workers of 2026 and the missing parents of 2050. One meeting, 40 years of consequences. Japan isn't finished. It's still the 5th largest economy on Earth, a testament to a resilience that is honestly staggering. Toyota still builds remarkable cars. Japan's cities are still extraordinarily livable, safe, and culturally rich. The people are, in many ways, still remarkable. But the machine is running on fumes. The population is aging faster than any country in history. The birth rate is at a record low with no floor in sight. The government has tried incentives for childbearing, cash bonuses, extended parental leave, and largely failed because the deeper problem isn't policy. It's that millions of young Japanese people look at the future and don't see a stable enough foundation to build a family on. And somewhere, an 80-year-old man is walking a quiet hallway, leaving food outside a door, waiting for a son who may never come out. That is what happens when you build an economy so optimized for winning that it forgets to build a society for living. This has been the autopsy of a giant. All right, that's it for me for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let me know in the comment section. This channel is brand new, 23 subscribers. If this story was worth your time, hitting subscribe genuinely means everything at this stage. Help me keep making these. I'll see you in the next one.